Calaveras County, and welcome to another edition of Mondo Calaveras. I'm your host, Mike Taylor. It's summertime, and it's time for fun. Now, we usually think about going outside, but this year we're going to stay inside when we go to Murphy's Creek Theater up in Murphy's, and I'm very pleased to welcome again to my show Graham Scott Green. Nice to have you again, Graham.
Thanks, good to be here.
Now, I got to tell you that Maple and Vine, which closed just a couple of months ago, or played a couple of months ago, was a really intriguing show.
Isn't it?
Really a funky script.
Yeah, it is.
And what have you got coming up this year, the rest of this year?
Well, the next thing we're doing is Measure for Measure. It's William Shakespeare. And that's being directed by Raquel Ruelas, who actually played my daughter in Equivocation last year.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, and she's really knocking it out of the park. She's a really good director. And then after that is The Lady of the Dawn, which is an adaptation and translation of a Spanish play that was actually translated by Sabrina and Pilar Julian, some locals around here. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful play that takes place at the turn of the last century on the north coast of Spain. And they did a really great job in capturing the imagery that Spanish writers are famous for.
Incorporating even into a script, which generally isn't really visual.
Right.
So how does that come across in a script?
The words.
Really?
Yeah, the words.
Even just the way they write the dialogue.
Yeah, and just the pictures they paint with the words are just incredible.
Yeah.
And Spanish writers are known for that. And they did a really fine job of getting that out.
Getting that in there.
Yeah.
And what kind of play is it? Love story, comedy? What?
I would call it a pastoral play.
Okay.
It's about a family, and actually, I don't want to give away too much, but it's about a family and their encounter with death.
Oh, okay.
Which doesn't sound, it doesn't sound all that beautiful, but it really is the way that it's written.
Monty Python skit.
Right, yeah. But the way it's written and the way that it's used is it's just exquisite.
Nice.
Yeah.
And something else to have local translators.
That's right.
Huh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
And this is one of the 3 plays of the New Play Festival that we did last year. And, And it's such a lovely play. I really wanted to do it.
Large cast, smaller cast?
There's about 11 people in it.
Oh, really? That's a pretty good
it's a pretty good sized cast, yeah.
And that's going to be done at
the Playhouse, that mid-August to mid-September.
Okay, and I started talking about this, folks, but your Theater Under the Stars is kind of theater in a starlit place inside now, right?
Yes,
because you're actually doing it inside.
We're doing it in the Black Bar Playhouse.
Okay.
We've got a full season.
Measure for Measure. That's one of Shakespeare's that I'm not even remotely familiar with. So cue us all in on it a little bit.
Well, okay. Ever since Equivocation, I have been fascinated by what was going on in Shakespeare's world when he wrote the plays that he did.
Okay.
Because Equivocation is all about why he wrote Mackers, the Scottish play. This was Measure for Measure was written the year before, in 1604, and it was a time of turmoil because the long, stable reign of Elizabeth had recently ended, and James ascended to the throne. It was a time of upheaval and a time of religious upheaval, strict religious strife, actually. And that's the kind of thing that was going on in Shakespeare's day when he wrote Measure for Measure. Measure for Measure is about this duke who leaves his captain in charge, and he goes off. He's going to go off to. He says he's going off to Italy, but he's not. He's just going to disguise himself and walk around town.
Oh, okay. So it is Shakespeare.
Yeah. And always have to have a disguise somewhere.
Yeah.
And it turns out that Angelo, who the Duke left in charge, is extremely strict. He's decided that. Well, the Duke knows this. The Duke has a speech in the beginning that talks about, "I've just been too lenient with the people, and now I can't just not be, now it'll seem doubly worse if I just crack down on him. So he leaves Angelo in charge, and Angelo really, really cracks the whip, more so than he should.
Oh, okay.
And the Duke has to figure out a way to sort of unwind what he's set in motion. And again, it's Shakespeare, so somebody's going to be executed, and we have to figure out a way not to have that happen. And also, it's one of his later plays, which is when he started to mess around with genre. They call it a comedy because they don't really know how to classify it. But it is comic. There are comic parts in it. But this is when Shakespeare started messing around with tragicomedies.
Oh, okay.
And because there's some serious stuff that happens in this play.
Yeah.
Not the least of which is this guy's going to get executed. But there's also some really funny stuff. And Pompey is a tapster in the town. He's a pimp, and he's just a scream. He's just a riot. He's a really, really funny character. So it's Shakespeare branching out, and it's
which
really
is interesting.
Yeah, it is. It really is. It's really interesting, and it's really interesting to work on the play. And
are you playing a character in it?
I'm playing the Duke.
Oh, you are?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm playing the Duke. Yeah. Kelly, the director, she has done a fabulous job of cutting the script.
Oh, okay.
To keep it.
It's one of those 48-hour plays that.
Well, yeah, it's Shakespeare, so if you said every word he said, you'd be here.
Me, and you know that's always kind of one of my grinds on it.
Right.
And then again, I always joke, and a lot of viewers know this too, but it's the 20 minutes of getting used to talking in metaphor.
Right.
That really makes me have to sit there and kind of concentrate. And, okay, that's right, he just said the sky is blue. But he didn't use those words.
Exactly,
He had to get at, you get out the thesaurus and stretch it out into a few seconds.
Right.
But that's actually something that, for me, as a theater goer, it can make it work, but at the same time, it's kind of a good kind of work, I think. And I guess where I'm going with this is, do you find that audiences now, they're used to Murphy's Creek Theater having a Shakespeare show every summer? Is there a contingent that looks forward to it and looks for what you're going to pull out of the bag, and rather than doing Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, Macbeth, sort of the staples of his canon?
Yeah.
And this time you're branching out a little bit too.
Yeah. Well, we've done all those, the standards. Have even been around for 22 years. So we've done, and every year we do a Shakespeare. So we've gone through all of those, and the histories. I don't know that they would go over well, but but some of the, I want to explore as much of his canon as I can, and I've been wanting to tackle this one for a while. I think this has. It's really interesting. It has religious and legal overtones that I think are really, really pertinent today.
Well, that's the one interesting thing about Shakespeare, is that once you do kind of delve into and decipher the metaphors and really watch what he's talking about, that's no doubt why his works are still being done, because they are almost timeless.
Right.
Those darned racial issues, sexual issues, whatever, political issues are still going on, probably because he was such a good examiner of the human psyche, is kind of what I look at.
Well, that's exactly it. He was the first, arguably anyway, he was the first playwright to actually write real human beings and have these. I mean, he was 400 years ahead of Freud, or 300 years ahead of Freud.
Yeah.
But he was writing psychodrama, and everybody else is writing this giant, sweeping epic stories with larger-than-life heroes and just these heroic stories, these epic stories. And he decided to write about people and what makes them tick.
Yeah.
And that's why he's still around, yeah.
Does, you mentioned Equivocation. Again, another fantastic production that you guys pulled off last year. And a very interesting play, again. An incredibly interesting... I mean, it's one of those that, I probably should have seen 3 or 4 times, because it had nuances in just about every scene. That you weren't exactly sure where this was going and where that's going. Do you really look for shows that sort of turn that screw a little bit so the audience has to
I do.
play along and guess a little bit?
Well, I do. I mean, this isn't a very sophisticated theater audience, so I can't do something like Keely and Do, which is I don't even want to get into what that is, but I do like to push the edge a little bit. Like Maple and Vine was. I thought it was a fascinating play.
Maple
from the first
and
time I
Vine
saw it.
was a piece of work,
Yeah,
and in the best sort of way that I can say that. And it's one of those that I can't talk about with people because you don't want to give away a lot of what happens in that show.
Right.
It's a very peculiar setup, and folks, so you know, and it's not too foreign. Basically, it was a New York couple that just felt completely overwhelmed by today's technological, I'll call it nonsense. You had to check your email. You were always worried about what was being said about you on Facebook. And the wife bumps into a gentleman who, in hindsight, you almost kind of want to call him the guy with the blue suede shoes who's, talking a great game. Because they stumble into a society of people who are enraptured with the 1950s. And they set up an entire community that is kind of 1950s America. Well, now, where the questions came up in it was race. That's kind of the big one. And I won't talk about any more of it in there, but again, an interesting play that really kind of pulled the audience along and then went, oh, by the way, there's this too.
Right.
And that was really an interesting something. And how did the players, your actors, sort of respond to it as they were working up a show like that?
Oh, they loved it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. They through the whole thing. I mean, they knew full well what they were signing on for, and really enjoyed delving into that. And
it was a relatively young cast for Murphy's Creek Theater.
Yeah, it was. And but we got a lot of compliments about the show, and we also got some hate mail.
Oh.
And we did get a couple of people who left, so it just wasn't their cup of tea. But those are all good things for a theater.
Yeah.
I mean,
very much so.
We are engaging in a conversation.
Well, one of the things that I said to one of the actors that was in the show, and you'll appreciate this, and I can cue the audience in after I say it, but it was a very Don Bellotti at Stage 3 show.
Yes.
And Don Bellotti was the artistic director at Stage 3 Theater in Sonora, who brought August Osage County there, which no one would have thought that many four-letter words could be performed on a stage in the Mother Lode, and yet it was just riveting. It was 3 hours and 20 minutes of live theater where you were petrified in the audience.
Yeah.
And so it was really cool to see Murphy's Creek Theater kind of upping its game. And I've noticed that this past year, it seems like the shows have kind of nudged that way, and I appreciate it. I'm sorry that some don't.
Yeah.
And honestly, our theater audience here in the Mother Lode is a little bit of that class of theater goer, where you can only do those shows.
Right.
You can only do a Neil Simon or the Shiny Sparkly Musical, and if you do anything outside those two boxes, you're somehow evil, and that's too bad. But I'm glad to see that, you're willing to take those chances and drag us along, sometimes kicking and screaming, but at the end of it, we appreciate it, so that's great.
Well, I'm so glad to hear you say that, and my board is going to be glad to hear you say that, too.
Did you frighten them a little bit?
I did scare them a little bit with that play. They were like, oh, can we do a farce? So, no, but I really like the idea of being able to bring in the conversation, being, engaging in a conversation with the community.
Yeah.
And not just presenting something to them that for 2 hours they're going to forget about their mortgage.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Yeah, and that's for me, going to a movie at a movie theater or plugging one into the DVD player or your Gizmobob. that's what I want it to do. I want 2 hours of, if I have to, I'll throw my brain in a jar, take me on a ride. And that's why you go see something like Deadpool. It's gonna give you a ride, and you're gonna enjoy it. And it's not the superhero movie you thought it was gonna be. And so I love the fact that we have theater right here in, Podunk, as some people might view it. You have theater up there? And it just stuns people, that we do. And when you find out there's 4, 5, 6 companies in 3 counties, doing all of this, especially during the summertime, it's really something. Speaking of your board, how do you go about sort of talking them into, no, honest, this is going to be okay. We're gonna get it, and getting away with it is the wrong thing to say, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
I
do.
Yeah.
And they're actually really pretty trusting of me, and I just basically put together a report with a little synopsis of each of the stories, each of the plays, and submit that to them as the season that I want to do, and we talk about it, and if they have questions, we'll talk about it, and but I've only ever had one play that my board just did not want to do. And,
really?
Yeah. And it actually had much more to do with expense than it was a play.
Oh, really?
They just felt it was too much for us to tackle at the time. Which was fine.
Yeah.
That's
the toughest thing. I mean, even for a monster, monster, that's a kind word. I don't mean it like it sounds, but monster being Sierra Repertory Theater, which has, they have an incredible budget through the course of a year. And interestingly, and this again goes to your board, that's not just ticket sales. That's the frightening thing, is that ticket sales really isn't even 50% of your operating budget, is it?
It is actually 60% of it.
Oh, it is? Okay,
yeah,
so you guys are a little bit above that hump, because at Sierra Rep, it's a pretty tough road to hoe for them.
Right.
You guys, do you have a really supportive community that is, kicking in to support this and keep it going to make up for that other 40%?
Yeah, we do. I write grants every year. Sometimes I get them, sometimes I don't. To foundations and arts councils and things like that. And we do have a capital campaign. We go out to the community and ask for support, and we're in the middle of that right now.
How's the theater doing? Because whether folks know or not, the Black Bart Playhouse technically is county property, right?
That's right.
And you have a lease with the county.
That's right.
And yet you're responsible for maintaining the whole thing.
That's right.
And I know the roof has caused you some problems in years past. How's it doing now?
Just a year worse. That's a huge expense that to cover that, and that's a capital campaign. In fact, what we're doing now is we're doing a buy a seat campaign.
Oh, okay.
You get $150 tax deductible donation, and you get a plaque that you can put your name or your name of a loved one or whatever on. And that seat is yours when you come to the theater.
Oh, okay.
And we're in the middle of that as well, and we are. There's a couple of things that we're trying to raise money to do around the building. Not the least of which is come up with about 40 gallons of paint.
Oh.
Because it's the whole building needs just a good coat of paint.
Needs a good coat. Huh?
Yeah. Anyone who's interested in helping out with that, throwing a couple of bucks our way, we could sure use it, because that's really how we're going to be able to make some of these improvements that the building really needs.
Yeah. Okay. How old is that building?
It became a theater in 1987.
Okay.
Because
it was a road maintenance building, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Before that?
Yeah, it was a Caltrans shed.
Yeah.
But I don't know how long it was there before that.
Okay.
But I know it became a theater in 1987.
Yeah, that was the Black Bart Players.
That's right.
That was doing that. So
yeah.
Nice that you kept the name, at least.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of become it's the building, the Black Bart Playhouse is the building, and then, Murphy's Creek Theater performs at the Black Bart Playhouse.
In it, yeah. And the building is actually used for more than just your shows, right? I mean, there's, do you have any, concerts, that kind of thing coming up in the summer?
Not in the summer.
Okay.
But we do have, I think, no, that's in August. There's one in August, there's a concert in August, and then in November there's a couple of shows.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's a nice theater.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the one thing, and it sounds good.
The acoustics are amazing, yes.
Unless you're standing in those one or two spots on stage where your voice suddenly stays right where you're standing.
Right.
That's very strange when you see an actor pass through that space and where'd that word go? And I know that because I acted in a couple of Black Bart Players melodramas on that stage, and there were almost white chalk outlines. Thou shalt not stand here.
Right.
The stage at the Metropolitan here in San Andreas was the same way. There were two big gaping spots on it where you could almost shout and your voice wouldn't go anywhere. It's just weird how buildings get that. What are you looking forward to for the rest of this season? What show really do you think is going to really intrigue and impress the audience?
I think The Lady of the Dawn.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a really beautifully written play, and like I said, the imagery that they paint with the words is just exquisite, and I think that's going to be a really good one. I'm looking forward to our new Playfest, which we're doing again this year.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned it again because I missed it last year. How do you go about doing something like that?
There are a few websites and portals that I put out information to about what we're looking for. We're looking for full-length plays that have not been produced before.
Okay.
And then we accept submissions up through September, and then we select 3 and put them on
as
for
what are called staged
readings.
Right?
Exactly, yes.
And now are those basically actor types, because they don't necessarily have to be actors, I don't imagine, but they're kind of sitting around and doing it, or do they actually kind of act it out on the stage?
Well, it really depends on who the director is.
Okay.
But there's variations in there, and like some are just straight sit down and talk, and it's just about the words. And there are other directors who like to add a little bit of color.
Okay.
But mostly it's just sitting and listening to the play.
And then do you give the audience some mechanism to vote, and they pick one of those shows, and you try and do it next year? Is that kind of what the goal is?
Yes, and we have a discussion after each play. After
nice.
Each play, there's a conversation with the audience about what works and what doesn't work. And
do the playwrights like that, or is it so nerve-wracking their heads are about to explode?
They hate it, but
Don't
it's so
chew
good
up
for
my
them.
baby.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right. Yeah.
But more than that, though, it's just hearing an audience reaction to what you wrote for the first time is just so good, for a playwright.
Well, that's the beauty of live theater, is that instant gratification, if you will, because as someone who has performed, and I know you know this, but if you have a flat audience during a comedy, you start to think if your voices aren't being heard out there, you start all kinds of things start ruminating through the brain. We're not doing something right. And then you just realize that audience just isn't a laugh out loud kind of crowd.
Right.
And then when you get that really boisterous laugh out loud kind of crowd, no, not necessarily full of alcohol, but suddenly your performance even gets energized, and and so you almost lean into that next really good punchline.
Right,
and so that I think is what is the most exciting thing about live theater, is feeling that interaction.
Yes, feeling that energy, absolutely.
And that's the beauty of playhouses like the Black Bart Playhouse, which is relatively small in the grand scheme of things, and something small like Stage 3 in Sonora, where you get so close. The amphitheater over at Main Street Theater Works in Jackson, you're so far from the players that sometimes you feel like, oh, there is a show going on down there. And it's not because the amphitheater is that big, it's just that's kind of the way it's laid out. So it's not necessarily a strike against them. It just, I would think, would make it more difficult for them to engage that audience and bring you along on the ride.
Right.
What are you doing for Christmas time this year? Are you doing any kind of holiday show?
Yes, in fact, we're doing a Christmas Carol.
Oh, really?
Yes. Cindy Clover is directing it.
Oh, nice.
And we're setting it in 1943, 100 years after it was written.
Oh, wow.
Which allows us to do some things with it that better reflect 1943 culture.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Like maybe Bob Cratchit is in the service. So maybe Mrs. Cratchit's got to go work.
Oh, my gosh. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's some things to play with there, you know, and also it's, you know, I mean, it's a time of, you know, it's a time of everybody gathering together, you know, in a really powerful way.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I can imagine that being pretty powerful. I look forward to seeing how you bring that together.
Yeah.
Graham, we've just got a couple minutes left. What would you ask a prospective audience member to do when they come to their next Murphy's Creek Theater show? Aside from making a $500 donation.
Well, yeah, that, but I would ask them to bring an open mind.
Okay.
You know, sometimes a play we did a while ago. I can't remember what it was called. Anyway, it was a Jeffrey Hatcher play, and it ended without any resolution. I mean, it was the kind of thing where, I mean, kind of like Maple and Vine. Maple and Vine ends, and you're like, are they going to stay there?
I call that a head scratcher.
Yeah. You know, yeah. So, I think bringing an open mind and it's lightning in a bottle.
And be ready for the ride.
Yeah.
You know, and just latch your horses onto that wagon and enjoy the trip.
See where it goes, yeah.
That's great. Well, I want to thank you for being here.
Sure.
I'm going to take just a second and talk to the audience because, folks, we're in the heat of summer and it's time for music in the parks. Keep your eyes out for Wednesdays, Saturdays, gosh, I want to say even Thursdays. There's music in the parks happening all over this county, and I encourage you to not only attend, but support the organizations that throw those events. Those concerts are free for you, most of them, and when you get there, make sure and make a donation, especially to the Calaveras County Arts Council. So as you enjoy your summer, come back next time and enjoy another issue of Mondo Calaveras. I'm your host, Mike Taylor. I'll see you next time. Enjoy.